All right, we are going to kick things off. Th- Thank you all so much for being here. We are super excited to see such a great turnout. My name is Rahima Tosani. I'm the Director of Strategy and Innovation at GHV. I stutter, so I appreciate you all being patient. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about GHV, and then we are going to get into our conversation. So, we are a female owned and operated global health and development consulting firm. We've been around for about 17 years. And because we work across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, we kind of often play this unique role as a connector. Um, and it's from this distinct place that we seek to bring together different stakeholders across the sectors to advance important conversations. So that brings us to our discussion today. We're super excited to talk about how pharmaceutical companies are advancing their global health efforts using AI. We have some amazing speakers. I'm going to introduce our moderator, and he's going to introduce our panelists and then give some brief contextual remarks. Once the discussion is over, we're going to save time for Q&A, so please feel free to put your questions in the chat. So I'm super excited to introduce Amandeep Madra. He's going to be our moderator for our discussion. He is the Senior Program Officer for Global Health R&D and Industry Engagement at the Gates Foundation. He comes to the foundation with over 20 years of pharmaceutical industry experience, including most recently serving as the Senior Director of Global Health Strategy at GSK. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Amandeep.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that greatly. And hello and welcome to everyone that's joined us here today. I appreciate that, and thanks to colleagues and friends at Global Health Visions for arranging and facilitating today's really interesting and important discussion. So I've got the great privilege to be able to introduce our panelists and to moderate this session. Our panelists today are Nelson Otieno and Ava Skolnik. Nelson is currently the medical lead for the really brilliant Healthy Heart Africa project, and is currently the acting Middle East and Africa chronic kidney disease policy shaping lead at AstraZeneca. Nelson's an experienced medical and policy advisor with over 7 years of delivering health equity programs for cardiovascular and kidney disease in Africa. And Ava joins us from Merck. She's currently the Associate Director for Health Equity and Partnerships there. She initially worked on Merck's US vaccine public policy team and has completed a Fulbright Public Policy Fellowship in 2024 in Thailand in the Division of Disease Control. So welcome both Nelson and Ava to today's discussion.
Thank you.
Now, just before we dive into the discussion, I'll ask you some challenging questions and we'll get into them. If I could just take a couple of minutes just to share some reflections on reflections from the Gates Foundation and for myself on the critical role that pharma plays in global health R&D, and why embracing these new technologies of AI and some of the associated digital technologies is becoming sort of increasingly essential to the collective mission, not just of the Gates Foundation, but all of your global health divisions inside your companies. In the Gates Foundation, we've always believed in the power of innovation to tackle neglected disease and to improve health for those who need it most. And when we invest in innovation, we're focusing on creating treatments and vaccines that are more effective, more affordable, and also quicker to act, which is especially important in those environments where health infrastructure faces really serious challenges, as it does in the low middle income countries that we serve. And just to put the power of innovation into perspective, a piece of research that we were involved with Impact Global Health predicted that between the years 2000 and 2040, those innovations, those breakthroughs in neglected disease research are expected to save around 40 million lives, to avert about 3 billion DALYs. And for each dollar that's invested inside global health innovation, there's a return on investment to society of about $400. So that's the kind of scale of impact that we're talking about. And right at the forefront of delivering that innovation is, of course, the pharmaceutical industry. Pharma has developed life-saving treatments. They've ensured medicines reach patients around the world. And beyond just their work on drug discovery and drug development, pharma has also played a very significant role in strengthening healthcare systems, optimizing supply chains, enhancing infrastructure, and even shaping policy. Despite all of that, as we all well know, despite all of that progress, there are still very significant challenges. Access to medicine, particularly in LMICs, remains uneven. Healthcare systems are still fragmented and very fragile, as we've seen in recent months, and innovative solutions aren't always, the uptake is not always as rapid or as efficient as patients need. So it's in the context of those really enduring and ongoing challenges where new technologies can provide a step change in performance and therefore delivery. And AI is one of those real step change technologies. It's already reshaping how the pharma industry operates. It's creating new opportunities for enhancing accessibility, scalability, efficiency across the whole of the healthcare journey. We've seen it we've seen AI predictive analytics revolutionize supply chain management, significantly reducing drug and vaccine shortages. We've seen machine learning algorithms help identify health threats earlier, much more precisely, allowing us to make better responses. And of course, in drug discovery and drug development, AI is cutting costs and time to bring new technologies and new therapies to patients. So looking ahead, adopting AI in digital health is not simply beneficial, it's clearly something that's going to be essential. And companies that are leading that charge, companies that are embracing and leading on that basis, not only gain competitive advantage with new markets to serve, but they also play this really vital role in bringing more resilient and inclusive, building a more resilient and inclusive global health ecosystem. So there we have this shared goal, and the shared goal is clear: to ensure that medicines and vaccines and indeed diagnostics are accessible to everyone, regardless of where they are or what their economic circumstances might be. And we believe that embracing AI and digital tech is a pivotal step towards achieving that vision. So in the context of that sort of environment, let's dive into the discussion straight away. And I'm going to turn to Nelson, if I might start with yourself. You're there on my screen. Perhaps you can tell us from the ways that your company and AstraZeneca, maybe how you're using AI to increase access to global health products or services.
Thank you so much, Amandeep. And I think I'm delighted to be in this session, just to be able to highlight and to represent AstraZeneca and the great work we are doing as a company to be able to advance AI and also innovation, not just through our pipelines or creating and advancing new medicines, precision medicine for our patients, because our value as a company is putting patients first. But beyond that, we are science-led and we collaborate strongly with our partners to be able to advance patient outcomes through transformative AI care. So at AstraZeneca, we have embedded AI and innovation right from our product development and across the business, from tailoring medicines, precision medicines for our patients, to optimizing dosing and also outcomes, and also help us to predict these risks that are associated with our patients. We are even going further in our supply chains. We are actually integrating AI solutions to be able to create and automate our production. We are also ensuring that any failures that we identified are also being captured right on time, and we also act on it quite safely. And most importantly, we are also just optimizing our logistic processes. And over the time, we've had some great impacts in terms of delivering these medicines to our patients. But I think my focus today would be more towards our health equity agenda. And I think that's where I strongly sit. Healthy at Africa program is a health equity program that was established in 2014. We've had 10 years of great impact working with ministries, our partners in the ground, and delivering great science to our patients. And through the program and other health equity programs that we run, we have quite a number of them. We've been able to use and leverage AI to be able to deliver some innovative solutions to our patients. And one example that stands out is Cure AI, which is an AI algorithm that we are using to be able to detect patients who have lung cancer. This has been rolled out across 33 markets, and I'll be able to share the impact of this program as we go along. Beyond that, as a program, we are actually leveraging AI for CKD diagnosis through our Otieno scope. This, we believe, is going to be groundbreaking. And the reason we would love to leverage this, especially in underserved populations where we come from, is that the time to diagnosis for CKD is quite long. We have patients requiring to test 3 months apart. The complexities of that diagnosis becomes a huge challenge. But then we are coming up with solutions that we believe that would be able to reduce the time to diagnosis, have impact on primary care physicians who are treating these patients. So we believe that through this transformative science, we will be able to reach more patients. And we have several other solutions, which I will not delve into today, but we are providing MedSol, which is a breast cancer screening solution, which is being provided in South Africa. We have TRICO, which is an AI algorithm that is able to detect patients who have heart failure. And beyond that, we are providing telehealth and working with our partners to be able to provide dedicated care, tailored solutions to our patients in remote locations, and to be able to provide consultations in resource settings where we believe that human resource is quite stretched. And now we believe in the double burden of both communicable and non-communicable disease. Thank you.
Nelson, thank you for those. I was really struck by those three. I mean, you touched very briefly on two of those. They're all diagnostic tools. Just give me a sense. Are they cheaper? Is it that they're more scalable and they can get out, or are you taking out the need for real expertise in the healthcare worker community in terms of being able to analyze information? Just give me a sense of kind of how the AI element is leading to a better diagnostic solution.
Absolutely. I think this comes from the fact that, and WHO talks about this, staffing as regards to specialty care is quite, low and quite stretched, especially in low resource settings, as you could see in Africa. And these solutions are just here to complement those services. That how can we be able to maximize and optimize those human resources to be able to provide the best care for these patients? So ultimately, because these are novel solutions, they come at a cost. They're quite expensive in the beginning, but over time, because these solutions do not only provide one-stop solutions to one disease, they can actually be, leveraged to provide multiple solutions. And I'll give you an example. We are actually leveraging some of the solutions, like your AI, to be able to not just diagnose lung cancer, but also, diseases like COPD and heart failure. And in advanced, we hope that once we advance this, it provides a cost-effective solution for, places where we are not able to leverage the human resource we have. Another significant thing that we can highlight is that in these high burdens settings and low resource settings, we find that patients have to travel quite far to be able to get care. Then it becomes very difficult for them to get specialty care. And I will demonstrate through our impact in the subsequent discussions how we've been able to reduce time to diagnosis. And we believe that early diagnosis, of course, affects patient outcomes, and of course has a huge impact in terms of economic costs and the overall health economy in general. So I think this would be some of the answers we would love to address today in terms of what is the cost effectiveness of these AI solutions and innovation.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that, Nelson. And Ava, maybe I can just turn that same question to you. So how are you using AI technologies at Merck to increase access?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Amandeep. And Nelson, I'm so glad we're on the same page. So first, I would just want to take a step back and situate kind of where I sit within Merck, because I think that'll help ground our conversation. So I'm part of the Health Equity and Partnerships team, which has a mandate to increase access to Merck's innovative medicines and vaccines in LMICs in a commercially sustainable way. And I want to highlight commercially sustainable because we see that as a way to enact lasting business practice changes so that we can reach the most patients all over the world. And utilizing the latest digital and data health tools is really how we're going to achieve that mandate. I think AI is such an important part of how we're going to make that meaningful change. So through AI, machine learning, across what we're doing in the labs, starting to think differently how we approach customers, all the way down to patient education and counseling. And so you can really see how AI can change across the value chain. And one thing that we've done is that we've stood up the Merck Digital Sciences Studio. And I'm personally very excited about it because I think it's fascinating that we'll be able to really enable the generation of innovative technologies for drug discovery and development. So this Merck Digital Sciences Studio is going to accelerate and pilot different novel innovative digital technologies that are specifically aligned with Merck's portfolio. And then Nelson actually mentioned Cure AI, and I think Cure AI is a great example of how, we are more than the sum of our parts. So Merck is also investing in Cure AI, and I think that just goes to show how exciting this diagnostic tool is. And so, as Nelson mentioned, they deliver AI augmented detection for TB, lung cancer, stroke. They've already done it at over 2,700 imaging sites across more than 90 countries. And so we know that early detection is so important in the diagnosis of lung cancer. And so by using this new diagnostic tool, patients would have best chance of survival outcomes and overall improving their quality of life. We've also invested in MammoTest, which uses AI to enhance breast cancer diagnosis, specifically in Latin America and Spain. And so they're looking at how they can continue to improve the solutions to breast cancer diagnosis so that it can be more accurate and faster than the standard of care. And so I think as we're growing patient populations, the burden of disease on health systems is continuing to exert more pressure. These new diagnostic tools really present a huge opportunity for early detection and management. And then if we go along a different patient funnel, we're also exploring the ways in which AI can help build health awareness and education, specifically for vaccines. I think we're starting to see how an AI chatbot can really help patients navigate complex questions that they might have about vaccines. And so these new Gen AI tools can really help tailor the response to specific patient needs and adapt to make sure that the patient concerns are addressed. This is also important because it's task shifting away from HCPs. And so when consumers come into the HCP office, they have more targeted questions and a better sense of what questions remain after already interacting with a chatbot so that the HCPs can have more direct conversations.
Okay. And right at the top of that, you talked about the digital science studio. Can you just kind of lift the lid on that a little bit, as much as you can, Ava?
Yeah, sure. And I'm
particularly any global health innovations that you might be pursuing in there.
Yeah, there's a few. So I would say I will drop the link in the chat so people can kind of explore all of the different kind of startups that are in that lab. We're now in the third year of the cohort, and so it's been running for about 3 years. The startups are in various stages. Some are focused on oncology, some are focused on neuroscience treatments, and so it's really spanning the gamut of our whole entire portfolio in terms of therapeutic areas.
That's amazing. That the idea of those kind of crowdsourced approaches to global health, but also to give from a capacity building perspective,
Yeah,
giving emerging researchers the capability to be able to have dialogue with and engage with the big pharmaceutical companies.
exactly. And it's building capacity, like you said, on the ground. I think crowdsourcing these new and novel ideas, understanding that, Merck doesn't have all of the answers, but really wants to accelerate and pilot some of these new inventions as well.
And just give me a sense of how is this different from, how has the injection of that new technology created a kind of an inflection point? How is that different to what you might have done in the past? And do you have some sense of the impact that that's having, the knock-on impact that's having on patient lives?
I think for us, we're still in the phase. I think there's the inflection point in terms of, okay, the global health ecosystem is changing, AI is changing. But I think in terms of like measurement specifics, there's still a lot of data that needs to be seen. I think, we have the existing health specific outcome measures that exist, right? They're broadly applicable across digital health interventions. But I think currently we're lacking those established standards of measurement and benchmarking specific for some of these Gen AI tools. And so that's one area that I think, the global health ecosystem really needs to lean into. And if I can take a minute to think through kind of those 3 different areas of measurement, I think that could be potentially helpful. So I think about it in 3 different categories. So there's the standard health metrics in terms of, morbidity and mortality really remaining key. If we're talking about screening, which we mentioned, both Nelson and I, around Cure AI and diagnostics, right? How many people were screened and then how many people were accurately diagnosed? If we're talking about vaccination, how many people went to get vaccinated and then were actually vaccinated as a result? And so I think those are the standard health metrics that we have in place. I think in terms of Gen AI specific, we have to really continue to build those Gen AI specific measurement models. So what is the type of AI system being used for tools that are using those large language models to generate the responses? Are they correct? Are they complete? And then I also think we can't lose the quality of care element because we talk so much about quality of care in the provider-patient interaction, but also there's the qualitative factor of quality of care when you're interacting with AI, right? Is it understandable? Do you feel like there's some sort of empathy with AI, the appropriateness of tone and style? And then lastly, I think really thinking about the ability to scale across countries. How are we thinking about cost effectiveness as the key evaluation metric, especially as a lot of this data is continuing to come in?
That's really, really helpful to sort of see that, because it's a tricky problem about how to evaluate impact and effectiveness of any intervention. And of course, uniquely, the global health world is driven by impact rather than the rest of your business, which is driven by possibly something slightly simpler, which is the commercials. Nelson, perhaps I can bring you into this as well. How's your company looking to evaluate the impact and effectiveness of some of those new interventions that you're designing, principally around diagnostics, it seems?
Yeah, so I think overall, I think what Ava's mentioned here in terms of task shifting becomes a very important element of tracking what we're able to do with AI and innovation, because I can give you a real world example of working in these countries and working in a space where CKD is highly prevalent, but not detected, highly undetected as well. We have high levels of undiagnosis. What you get from the specialists that are quite far apart and very few is that they are quite stretched by the number of patients who they have to attend to. So by providing AI solutions to detect these patients early, you're basically shifting that task from specialists who are very few to the overall primary care settings, and saving them lives. And I think Eva has also alluded to the fact that are we averting mortality? Are we averting morbidity? So what is the impact in terms of assessing that and aligning it to the SDG goals in terms of NCD shift? But going into it deeper, you can also just look at how many patients you've reached. If you had the same number of human resources, and I'm happy Ava is also collaborating with our partners in terms of KRI and similar solutions. We've been able to reach 5 million people across 33 countries, identified patients about 50,000 who have nodules which can be non-specific, and about 50K diagnosis, so 500K detection rates and 50K diagnosis rates for malignant cases, which is hugely significant considering the fact that we have very few specialists in the oncology space. And in most risk settings, we find it very hard to find this kind of diagnostic tests, including CT scans, which will be able to pick this out. So we see the impact in terms of number of people reached. We also look at time to diagnosis, and I think I mentioned this earlier. Like for example, one of our solutions which addresses breast cancer through AI algorithm has been able to reduce the time of diagnosis from 6 months to 2 weeks. We believe that is significant considering how heavy the burden is in terms of breast cancer in our region and how late they come and the impact that it has on our women in our community. So these, I think, are very important, metrics that we look into. But then there's the elephant in the room in terms of how many people can actually be reached and what are the costs. What do we need to do? Is it cost effective? So I think those are, more discussions we need to bring on board. And what we are doing as a company is engaging multiple stakeholders, including the Ministry of Health, patient advocacy groups. We are involving the civil societies just to understand how can we make these solutions available to our patients at a cost-effective price.
Yeah, that's really. I was struck by what you just said in that response, which is it wasn't just even the number of patients that you're reaching. I mean, there's some impressive numbers. There's the patients that you're reaching for the amount of investment that you're putting in comparison to the old world of doing it, which was clearly required sort of armies of people to reach 5 million people on a diagnostic. Could you say a little bit more about that elephant in the room? Because I think that does lead us to some of the challenges that we're facing. So, I mean, you talked there about if you're delivering effectively a diagnostic solution at a low cost, high level of accuracy, then you have to, the health system has to be able to respond to that. So, can you just talk a little bit more about the sort of emergent challenge that happens as a result of a step change in the service that you're offering?
Yeah, so I think all AI solutions, innovation that is sophisticated and that is niche, comes at a very high price and a cost, and somebody has to bear the cost, right? And it becomes a very difficult challenge, especially in low-income countries, low-middle-income countries, to be able to adopt these solutions. They need it, but it's not easily available because of the cost barrier. And we've seen time and time over again that the double burden of NCDs and communicable diseases has always stretched health systems. So from an economic perspective, it becomes very difficult to be able to invest in what we need, what we want, and what is actually required within the healthcare system. So cost becomes a big barrier. And the solution here is to leverage partnerships. In the past, through our program, Healthier Africa program, and I'll give an example, we've been able to manage partnerships with USAID, with the ministry, to be able to adopt solutions even during the COVID-19 period, to be able to train doctors when we couldn't get out, right? So we are still looking at the same front. We are recently at the NCD Alliance in Rwanda, just trying to get partnerships to be able to make these solutions available to the population. We understand we cannot do it alone. I know that Merck is also doing a great job there. So how can we partner to be able to get these patients to find the solutions in the best way possible. But that comes at a cost, because you also have to prove to governments why they need to invest in these solutions. And we're already, supporting some of activities with our governments to be able to, do economic evaluations, to be able to make sense of investing in healthcare now for the future. So making them understand. And I think you highlighted quite clearly earlier in this discussion that $1 investment is equal to a return of around $400. So that is what we're trying to demonstrate to these governments, for them to invest in health. Look at health as not as an expenditure, but rather as an investment, to be able to break this barrier as around costs. And I think that would be the biggest challenge that we do anticipate. Most, in other situations, what we see is competing interests. And again, it just comes to the costs. Would you invest in malaria, or would you invest in tuberculosis, or would you invest in an AI that detects lung cancer? So it's all about understanding what needs to be invested in, giving the evidence, which is critical, and then providing a partnership model that can be able to scale it up to the underserved populations.
Ava, maybe I can ask that question of you, but quite broadly. What do you think some of the challenges are that come with using AI in a global health setting, and what's Merck? How is Merck addressing some of those challenges?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And just to pick up the thread, what Nelson was saying around cost, and there's always trade-offs. And so hopefully by using AI, we can make some of those trade-offs a little smaller, right? So but if AI can save costs, then there's more room for other programs. And AI is so exciting. It's a rapidly developing field, but that means it's coming with a ton of challenges. And I think there's really three main challenges that I'm thinking about. So I think first is ethics and using AI responsibly, especially as we're thinking about deploying AI in low middle income countries. And so our company developed different principles to really leverage AI to better the lives of our patients, consumers, and society. And so I'd love to just go over a few of those principles. So first is using AI safely and with appropriate human judgment, making sure we're using it fairly, inclusively, and ethically, promoting transparency, monitoring the AI we use and securing it, and then really making sure that we're accountable in our use of AI and open to user feedback. I think that's really key, especially as we're developing patient-centered care and using AI. I think the second challenge that we've been thinking about is that the large language models aren't necessarily trained on or fluent in a lot of local languages. And so local languages have been coming up as like a huge barrier when we're thinking about Gen AI in healthcare settings. And so how do we really curate high quality data sets for underserved languages, including, region-specific dialects, culturally relevant health information, and voice data? And I was reading something around a patient asked a Gen AI model or reported that they had an empty chest. And so in sub-Saharan Africa. And that model then thought that they had depression because they said that they had an empty chest, and it was, developed in the West. Okay, so people thought empty chest meant they were feeling hollow and kind of sad. But actually what that patient was trying to convey, and culturally, was that they were having chest pain. Now that is a very different diagnosis, the treatment for depression versus treatment for chest pain. And so making sure, I think that's a huge challenge for us to make sure that these LLMs are trained to be culturally sensitive and have those nuances depending on your region, depending on your country, so that you can make sure that patients are getting referred to the accurate pathway. So that's one thing that's really top of mind for me. And then the third challenge is really around the digital divide. And I think making sure that we're not perpetuating the digital divide, making sure that as we're advancing AI models, we're also at the same time in parallel still advancing necessary digital and physical infrastructure within the countries, so that as we're deploying Gen AI models, if there's a patient referral pathway that says, okay, say Cure AI, for example, right? You get a positive diagnosis for lung cancer. Well, that doesn't do any good if you don't have the physical infrastructure to go to as well. And so while these tools are so exciting, I think it's so important to continue investing in health system strengthening as well.
Such an important message. that goes along with this. Nelson, would you like to add, is there anything else that you'd like to add on this question of challenges? Because I think the challenge question is much broader than the costs or the digital divide, but if you had anything else you wanted to add.
No, I think just to reiterate what I have said, things, how do we ensure that this, and again, it comes to equity, how do we ensure that these digital innovations can actually be able to be acceptable or rather usable or user-friendly to communities that otherwise it was not tested on. So, it needs a broad-based approach in terms of engaging different key stakeholders and involving as many parties as possible, not just the patients, but also the advocacy groups, the civil society, just engaging as much as possible, a wider stakeholder engagement to get views and thoughts and, enhance it. And a lot can be emphasized around the ethics. And I think that's a key outline for me right now here, that, we have to use AI ethically. We have to ensure that, we adhere to the local regulations and ensure that, it's for the patient benefit. So ultimately, the most important thing is that the patient is benefiting from these solutions and it's not bringing any form of harm. So it really goes back to how we ethically handle these innovations and solutions. So just a reiteration of what Ava said.
No, exactly. And actually one of a question that's come through on the chat window, which I think, I don't know if you've seen it, but both of you have got public policy experience or background. It says, how can or how should these tools be regulated? What's the consideration for policymakers? It says here in low resource settings, but actually it's policymakers outside of low income settings as well. But how should they, what are the considerations for them as they develop policy to respond to AI in their healthcare system? So I don't know if Ava or Nelson have got any particular responses to that one. Ava?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really good question. So thank you to whoever sent it through. And I think it allows us to both think about high income countries and low middle income countries in a similar space, which I think is a rarity sometimes, because this is such a new and evolving field, that the high income countries are grappling with the same question as low middle income countries at the moment in terms of ethics and policy regulations around AI. I think as more data comes in, it will be really interesting to see how the policy changes. And I think that's something that we all have to be open to, because it is a newer field. And so I think we can have guidance and policy recommendations today to really protect patients and make sure that we're doing everything ethically. But I think I could see them really evolving depending on more data coming in around more use cases around the use of AI.
Absolutely, and I think I would, completely agree that it's a new space, and it's all made even more complex by the fact that it's rapidly evolving. AI is rapidly evolving, and each new day there's something new being brought in. So how do we approach it? I think it's important to just put the patient first. We, of course, put a very strong ethical consideration to it, that does the benefit outweigh the harm that it brings. And how do you control and regulate, the information and the data? There's lots around data privacy that we, anchors around our local regulations. So I think a lot has to be linked between the AI itself and its solution and its innovation, and how it handles data, and how we ensure that also the patients feel confident in the solution that is being provided, because there is a lot of hesitancy from our patients in terms of providing the personal information. So how do we reassure them? And how do we ensure that this data is processed in the best way possible? So a lot of linkage to data privacy, but also ensuring that we have local regulations and an ethical way to approach it.
Awesome, thank you very much for that. So and also thanks for the question, person who posed that question, Keithy, I think. So thank you very much for that. And those of you that are on the line, if you've got any other questions, just type them into the chat window, because I'll move to those shortly. Could I actually, Nelson, while I've got you, could I just ask a specific question to yourselves? Because there's been a lot of talk about, in addition to global health, but climate health as well, and the impact of climate change as an aggravator for infectious disease and other disease as well. and it's particularly it's a particular issue to already vulnerable and remote populations. And I think AstraZeneca has been using AI in quite innovative ways to increase climate resiliency of your operations and services and products. So can you speak a little bit about that, just to shed a light on what you're doing on climate-aggravated disease and health, climate health?
Yeah, thank you so much, Amandeep. I think probably give one example is that CKD is a late stage diagnosis of CKD is associated with, of course, stage 4 and 5 is where we have a lot of carbon intensive treatment, whereby these patients require dialysis, which is associated with a lot of fossil use and water use, and also associated with a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, which is kidney renal transplant and so forth and so on. So we as a company believe in early screening and detection, and I think there's a question around how we are leading in terms of preventive care. And one of the solutions, or that some of the solutions we are bringing forth, one is, we have digital CKD screening register tools that the patients can log in either through a QR code and go in. And I think this is something similar to what Ava mentioned in terms of being able to assess their risk profile, to be able to get to care early, because we do know that early treatment, and even forget about even early treatment, even just prevention from getting into the actual disease, because some of these diseases are quite progressive in nature, would prevent this patient from ultimately requiring this carbon intensive treatment. So what we have done is we're trying as much as possible to integrate NCDs into with other non-communicable diseases, doing a lot of community outreach and preventive and promotive care outreach, just to identify these patients early through hypertension screening, awareness, advising them on their risk factors and what preventive care they need to take, just to ensure that they do not ultimately, or rather reduce the progression ultimately to end-stage renal disease or any of these carbon-intensive treatments that would ultimately lead to some increased carbon emissions.
Oh, it's fascinating. That's a really good real-world example, and obviously applicable for lots of companies as well. So thank you very much for that. And perhaps Ava, I can ask you a question as well. Actually, it came up in the chat window, but you mentioned just as a headline, use of AI in health awareness programs, and referenced in particular vaccines. So yeah, one of the audience was asking for, could you share more information about the applications of AI in the preventative space, e.g. COVID vaccine uptakes? I think they're thinking about.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's such a good question. And thank you for asking it, because I actually think that's one of the most exciting ways and most promising ways that we can continue to use AI to innovate, scale, and improve access. And actually, a survey a few weeks ago came out by the Stanford Center for Digital Health. And when respondents were asked to rank their top 3 priority use cases for Gen AI in global health, the top responses were health education and awareness as number 1, clinical decision support as number 2, and then health-related behavior change as number 3. And so I would say 2 of those 3 are about prevention, are about patients, are about health education and awareness. And so as we're thinking about how to use it in vaccines specifically, it's still underway, but I think the way that we can think about it is really building vaccines confidence for that patient before they're going into their provider office. I think being able to tailor to the unique needs of the patients and have that Gen AI chatbot be able to respond in real time, but also pull in data from elsewhere in like a culturally appropriate way is going to be really critical, especially as vaccines confidence has plummeted around the world. I think there's a really huge potential for this.
And can you tell us a little bit about what Merck, like what specifically Merck is doing around that? And if you're not able to, then.
Yeah, I would say it's in the early stages, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but I'm hoping in the next few months we will be able to talk a little bit more about what we're thinking about there.
Okay, maybe that's another webinar.
Yeah, the next webinar. Stay tuned.
And there's another question which is very similar to this. So maybe Nelson, if you want to comment, and Ava obviously will continue. But how do you think about AI interventions from the demand side? What strategies can be employed to gain trust and acceptance of but AI-driven healthcare interventions amongst local populations? So they in themselves, these, for example, the diagnostic technologies that you talked about, Nelson, at the beginning, they come with their own issues about acceptance of them. So how are you thinking about those as unique interventions, separate to what might be widely accepted historic ways of working? So yeah, if either Nelson or Ava, you want to comment on that.
Yeah, let me have a swing at it. In terms of gaining trust, it's something that often takes quite a significant amount of time and effort. And that's why through our efforts, we do engage key stakeholders. And these key stakeholders sort of act as our advocacy partners to be able to gain trust with our audience and also our patients and our, the groups that we are targeting. And the reason for this is because each of these stakeholders have an important role. One is the Ministry of Health, who are the policy lead and decision makers. So we do engage them, provide the evidence, because again, the only way you gain trust is providing evidence that is irrefutable, and you provide evidence to them to be able to get them to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. It's also important to then engage other stakeholders, including patient advocacy groups, for them to understand the benefits and of course also the risks, because even AI comes with risks. So an open platform for them to be able to discuss, understand the implications and also the benefits of these innovations. Then of course the doctors and the KEs and the external experts who we work with very closely. So I would say that stakeholder engagement and buy-in would be the most important way to sort of gain this kind of trust and also build reputation with the clients as well. It is important for them to understand the evidence available, the costs and implications, and most importantly, to provide a very open platform for them to understand. Last but not least, of course, is to continuously provide feedback to all the key stakeholders on what's going wrong, what's going right. So I think that also becomes a very important way of buying trust with the key stakeholders.
Yeah, and I would just add on, thanks, Nelson, for that. I think there's always, right, when you're introducing a new technology, there's always early adopters, kind of normative adopters, and then late adopters. And so I think as we're introducing new AI solutions, it's figuring out who are those early adopters and making sure that we're kind of targeting those trusted messengers to be early adopters, so that those that are most trusted in community can then go and kind of influence other adopters of the technology as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's turn our attention to clinical trials for a second. This is a topic that's close to our heart at the Gates Foundation. We're trying to do more as much as we can on diversifying patients in clinical trials and the amount of clinical research activity that's happening on the continent of Africa in particular. And Ava, you mentioned something which triggered a question from the audience. So you mentioned the limitations of large language data, or of the data, sorry, which LLMs are built upon, and how that can detrimentally impact chatbot responses, it says here. But what about the clinical trial and diagnostic data that underpin the AI systems like Cure AI and others? LMIC patients are historically underrepresented in that data, so there's a natural bias already there. And the question is asking, what is Merck or AZ? What are you doing about that? Do you have any awareness of what your companies might be doing about it?
Sure. Nelson, do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Oh, go ahead, Ava.
Okay. I think so. I think one issue of that is where the technology is and the innovations are really being developed. And so I think what we're thinking about and why the Merck Digital Science Studio is kind of the platform for that is because if we're developing tools only, say, in the North, only in the West, then they're not really getting more data, especially in the clinical trial space, from from on-the-ground patients in different geographies. And so I think as part of this Merck Digital Sciences studio, we're trying to crowdsource those different solutions so that we don't tend to have a bias of one specific patient population.
Maybe just to add, I think it's all about, clinical diversity. And I think we have been, as much as possible trying to expand, clinical trials beyond, a specific group type. So I think a lot has been ongoing, and I think there's a question around how we are deploying AI. We have solutions that are helping in terms of patient recruitment, patient tracking, and also just ensuring that we are also understanding the implications and the side effects that these patients are going through. So all this is just optimizing the overall pathway for these patients and helping us to understand better. Also ensure that we are, giving the best to our patients. Of course, it has not been without challenges. The challenges are there, but I think each and every day we are getting this feedback and just improving on whatever AI solutions that we have, just to ensure that we are diversifying our clinical trials as much as possible.
Awesome, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to ask the final question. It's quite a challenging one, but I love it. I love the optimism that comes with this question, and it's definitely something that we should all aspire to. So we've been talking about AI as a mechanism almost, or as a tool to catch up in the areas that we operate with. And this question asks, with the use of AI to create more accurate, faster diagnostics, enable more precise treatment protocols, and all the things we've talked about, how could this technology allow lower income countries to leapfrog the existing countries and the existing systems? So how could it actually be a positive advantage in the environment that we're operating in? So we'll have that as a final question, and then I'll hand back over to Global Health Visions to close us out today.
Maybe I can go first. Ava? I don't know.
Yeah, sounds good.
Absolutely. And I think from what we are investing in terms of AstraZeneca is our key priority is health equity, because we do know how disadvantaged and how much diseases is a disproportionate disease burden in low income countries. So we are working with governments and ministries of health and the different innovations. I'll give an example of Nigeria, where we've come up with an innovation together with our partners to be able to track patients in primary care settings, to be able to identify these patients early, track them, and also to bring them to care. And this is a local solution in that country that we are adopting together, the ministry. It is tailored for that setting, and we hope that these kind of examples are things that we might be able to expand across the continent. But beyond that, even when it comes to adopting strategies for early screening and diagnosis, because we do know that specialists are quite rare and they have to travel quite a long distance, we are coming up with AI solutions for CKD to just reduce the time to diagnosis in the settings. Beyond that, of course, there's we are rolling out telehealth to be able to provide consultative services to primary care physicians, to be able to consult from its remote settings. Of course, there's a challenge of internet, but then you find that in most circumstances, these primary care settings are willing to embrace this to be able to provide specialist care to the patients. So there are several other solutions that we are doing. And if you can go to the AZ website, you'll be able to find this and be able to see how we are growing as a company through innovation. Thank you.
Thanks, Nelson. So I think it's such a good question. And I think usually, cost-constrained environments usually breed the most innovation because they have to. And I think we can think about the example of community health workers having historically been used in lower middle income countries, and then high income countries catching on and realizing, oh, that's a really good idea. We should have community health workers and health outreach workers in high income countries as well to help patients navigate. And I think we're going to be seeing something, if I had to predict, if I had a crystal ball, I think we're going to be seeing something pretty similar with using Gen AI in low middle income countries because of necessity, and then high income countries later on will realize that it's tools that they should be implementing and can be implementing as well. So I think it's a really interesting space that LMICs can lead the way in.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you for your time. I had the easy job today to ask a few questions. You took all of those questions and answered them brilliantly. Thank you very much for your insights, your frankness, and the inspiration that's come with it. And with that, I'm going to hand you back over to my friend and colleague, Rahima.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. This was such an insightful discussion. We really appreciate your time, your expertise, and your perspective. And thanks all for the really fantastic questions in the chat. I wish we had more time to get to all of them. We are going to be sending out a follow-up email with the link to the recording, as well as actually our recent thought piece on how pharma companies can create strong partnerships to advance global health impact. So please keep an eye out for that. Before you all log off, there's going to be a quick survey that pops up on your screen. It's only 4 super short questions, so please send us your feedback. And again, we hope you'll join us for our next webinar, which should be in a few months. We will send you an email about that. If you want to know more about us and explore ways that we can potentially collaborate, please do feel free to get in touch. Thanks again, everyone, for your attendance, and we hope to be in touch soon. Have a great rest of your day, all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.